I'm a single dad, raising my only son. When my son Arthur was just 3 years old, my wife passed away due to illness. By the time they detected her breast cancer, it was already too late. In front of Arthur, I always put on a brave face, but in private, I'd shed tears, thinking about leaving my precious son behind. While she was still with us, my wife often said to me,
Arthur's a gentle boy. If you ever need to scold him, make sure you listen to his side of the story first.
even as she was pausing with her faint voice, she whispered,
Please take care of Arthur. I know you'll raise him to be a fine young man.
tears streaming down her face as she went to heaven. At 3 years old, Arthur couldn't quite grasp what was happening. Next to his mother who had just passed, he innocently asked,
Daddy, is mommy just taking a nap? When will she wake up?
believing she'd rise any moment. Holding back my own tears, I remember telling him, if you're a good boy, she'll wake up real soon. At the funeral, I asked my mother to take Arthur to a nearby park. When he wondered why his mom wasn't around, I lied, telling him, Mommy's at work, far away. He threw a tantrum, crying,
I want to go to mommy.
but the words, if you're a good boy, she'll come back, calmed him. His response, with a broad smile,
Okay, I'll be a good boy.
broke my heart. Later, I heard that even while he was playing in the park, he kept saying,
I'm going to be a good boy so I can see mommy soon.
hearing this made me feel so guilty. I couldn't keep lying forever, but I felt he wasn't ready for the truth yet. The company I work for is understanding about parenting, family illnesses, and kid giving. When they learned about my wife's illness, they let me leave on time, and after her passing, they offered to transfer me to a less demanding department. But stepping away from the projects I'd been involved with felt like it would dent my self-worth and diminish my confidence. Looking back, I wonder, why did I think that way? But at that time, I felt that my job was what kept me sane more than my son did. Life with just my son was tougher than I ever imagined. I had thought I was more involved in his upbringing during my wife's illness, but when it was just the two of us, things got overwhelming. I came to see just how much I had relied on my wife. After she passed away, I moved him to a daycare that offered evening care. At first, he didn't want to be apart from his friends and would often resist, exclaiming,
I don't want to go.
every time I'd deceive him with, if you're not good, mommy won't come back, just to get him to attend daycare. That change led to me often working late, picking him up way into the night. Perhaps diving into work was my way of avoiding the tough realities at home. My son, with his easygoing, calm nature, went about his mornings as usual, acting at his own pace and occasionally playing with toys. This often got on my nerves, and I'd end up shouting at him. He must have been hurt and probably played with toys to distract himself from missing his mom. Regrettably, I was too wrapped up in my own emotions to consider his feelings. Yet at daycare, he apparently told his teachers.
I love daddy so much.
Every time I picked him up, the teachers would often tell me, Arthur seems to really cherish the moments he spends with you. Under normal circumstances, this would have been heartwarming to hear. However, at that time, I was in such a negative headspace that I couldn't help but think, don't feed me such lies. Seeing me in this state, my mother started visiting more frequently to help out. She'd say,
It's hard on Arthur to be at daycare for so long.
and would pick him up as early as possible, even putting him to bed. My mother wasn't young anymore, and it must have been tough on my mother. She deeply cared for my wife, and I believe she was trying to cope with the loss of her daughter-in-law in her own way. Then, one day, after a while, I was assigned a significant project. My return home was consistently around 10 p.m. By the time I'd get back, my son would be asleep, and our only conversations were in the mornings. This went on for about 2 weeks, but then there was a lull, and for the first time in a while, I got home around 8 p.m. The project seemed to be going well, and it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Maybe I was just too drained, but when I got home, I went straight to my bedroom and jumped into bed. Suddenly, I felt like I stepped on something squished. In surprise, I pulled back the covers, and there was a plate of what looked like the side dish my son had for dinner. Exhausted and angry, I couldn't think straight. I yelled at my son who was playing in the living room and spanked him. Tears streaming down his face, he kept saying,
I'm sorry.
why the heck did you do this? Do you hate me that much? I couldn't stop myself and kept spanking him. My mother, startled by the commotion, rushed out of the bathroom shouting.
Stop it.
Yet, I couldn't contain my anger and yelled, "You always give me a hard time in the mornings. Maybe that's why your mom doesn't come back." At that, my son, crying harder, hugged me and said,
I'm sorry. I'll be good. I'm sorry for playing with toys in the morning. I promise I'll be better.
Having been calmed down by my mother, I regained my composure and asked my son, "Why did you do this?" He replied,
Because you always ate store-bought bread.
When I asked my mother about what had happened, she explained that my son overheard her saying.
Your dad always eats just bread. Poor thing.
Taking this to heart, he exclaimed.
I'll make something for him.
With her help, he prepared French fries, a salad, and a hot dog. My mother, intending to do the laundry and clean the bathroom, took her eyes off him for a bit. Not knowing what he did next, it seemed that my son thought the food would get cold, so he figured,
It won't get cold under the blankets.
and placed it there. Hearing this, a realization hit me. What have I done to my son without even asking him why? The tension I felt broke, and I burst into tears in front of both of them. Regretting the harshness towards my son's kind gesture, I cried out, "I'm a terrible dad, a total failure." Seeing me this way, my son reassured me.
Dad, you're not bad at all. Arthur loves you so much.
He then gave me a tight hug. Even though I yelled at him without understanding the situation, he consoled and comforted me. Guilt overwhelmed me. Later on, I washed the dirty blankets and sheets. When I peeked into my son's room, he appeared to have fallen asleep while clutching a photo of my wife and crying. I suddenly remembered what my wife used to say.
Arthur's a gentle boy.
At that moment, I vowed deep within, I'll never make the same mistake again. From that incident, I felt a sense of calm and a newfound direction. Determined to fulfill both the role of a father and a mother, I tried my best to leave work on time, prioritizing moments spent with my son. Instead of relying on my mother for household chores, I made it a fun activity to do with my son during weekends, maximizing our time together. Thankfully, the incident didn't cast a shadow over my son's heart. He continued to grow, vibrant and cheerful. Over time, he stopped saying,
I want to see Mom.
Time flew, and before my son was about to enter elementary school, there was an event at his preschool. During a parent-child activity, the children were to gift letters to their mothers in anticipation of their graduation. According to his teacher, Arthur wrote a letter addressed to my wife, just like the other kids. However, when the submission day arrived, for some reason, he did not turn in his letter and remained silent about its contents. Thinking that pressuring him further might hurt him, the teacher didn't pry and advised me, "Please don't force him to submit it." I respected that and chose not to press the issue either. A few days later, I got a call from the nearby post office. I had no clue what it could be about, but a strange feeling welled up in my chest. Answering the phone with bated breath, I was told that my son had deposited numerous letters without any address into the mailbox. The post office was incredibly busy around the end of the year due to New Year's cards and the likes, and I could sense the confusion in the voice on the other end. Honestly, upon hearing the story, an image of me scolding my son out of anger flashed before my eyes. However, remembering the vow I made not to repeat the same mistake, I calmed myself down and hurried to the post office. Fortunately, the postmaster was an acquaintance of my father and was aware of my family situation. He kindly advised, "There might be a reason behind this. Don't be too harsh on your son. Sit him down and talk it out." That day, my mother picked up my son, allowing me some time to collect myself before he came home. As he walked in, he seemed to sense the atmosphere and softly said,
I'm back.
before taking a seat in front of me, "Do you understand why I want to talk?" I asked.
Yeah.
He responded, and then he started explaining why he had done what he did.
My friends can give their letters to their moms when their parents come to visit, but my mom is far away, so I can't give it to her. So I thought the people who deliver letters would deliver it to my mom. I felt that now that I had the chance to reach the post, I should send all the letters I've written so far. But I did something wrong, didn't I? I'm sorry.
His tiny eyes filled with tears as he earnestly shared his feelings. I couldn't bring myself to scold him after hearing that. Instead, I hugged him tightly, struggling to hold back my own tears. "Arthur, thank you for telling me." But the post office staff were troubled by this, so let's go together and apologize, I told him, and we headed to the post office. After explaining the situation to the postmaster over the phone, he said to my son,
Next time, discuss it with your dad first. Okay.
He then gifted Arthur an envelope with a character stamp on it. That night, after my son went to sleep, I opened some of the letters. They were filled with his childish handwriting with messages like,
Mom, are you doing well? I'm being a good boy. I miss you.
He must have been writing these since he was very little. As I went through several letters, I could also sense his growth and maturity. The pure and innocent way children perceive the world, combined with their deep emotions and feelings, can be so profound. This story is a heartwarming reminder of the importance of understanding and communicating with our loved ones. Among the letters, there was one that seemed to have been written recently. It read,
Mama, you're up in the sky, aren't you? I'm lonely, but I'll be okay because I have Dad with me.
Seeing this, I choked back my tears. My son had come to understand that his mom was no longer with us. At the end of the letter to his mother, he wrote,
Please watch over Dad and me from the sky. I'll always love you, Mama.
I realized I might have been in denial about my wife's passing. However, my little boy had accepted the reality of his mother's death and was trying to move forward. I can't keep going on like this. After this incident, I was able to confront my feelings about my wife's death and my relationship with our son. Something changed within me. The next day was a Saturday, so I decided to visit my wife's grave with my son. He was excited about the outing, and I couldn't bring myself to tell him where we were going. Upon arriving at the cemetery, he suddenly became quiet. Did I bring him here too soon? I wondered. But as we reached my wife's gravestone, he asked,
Is Mama here?
And I was taken aback. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I managed to say, Yes, she's resting here. My son responded with his usual bright smile.
It might be cold inside the stone, but there are so many flowers, so she won't be lonely.
Then he spoke to my wife's gravestone, saying,
Mama, I've grown a lot, haven't I? Dad and I are going to watch a soccer game soon.
I couldn't stop my tears seeing him like that. My concerned son said,
Dad, are you hurting somewhere? Here's my handkerchief. Please don't cry.
He wiped away my tears with his own little handkerchief. Then he took all the letters he'd written to his mom and carefully placed them in a bag so they wouldn't get wet, setting it near the bouquet. My son cheerfully said,
Mama, this way you can read them anytime.
The temple priest kindly offered to store the letters for a while. Whenever we came to visit, they placed them on the gravestone, which always made my son happy. Years have passed since that day, and my son is now in middle school. My wife's framed picture and those letters from back then are displayed together. Every day, my son bows in prayer before heading to school, and sometimes he even talks to the picture of my wife. As he grew older and could grasp the concept of life and death, he asked about my wife's passing. His memories from when she passed were blurry because he was so young, but he seemed to remember when I had lost my temper and spanked him. And about the letters, yet he never held it against me, saying,
Dad, you were doing your best to raise me, right? I was glad when you listened to me about the letter.
Even with the pain of loss, he's grown up to be a kind-hearted boy. And there are moments when I see glimpses of my wife in him. It's been 10 years since my wife passed away, and without a doubt, it was my son who pulled me out of despair. Life might throw challenges at him in the future. He might hit roadblocks. When those times come, I'll be there to support and rescue him. I want to honor the promises I made to my wife to ensure she can watch over us from above with peace of mind.